Hey guys, today's story is going to be another collaboration between RPG Tales and Artificial DM. Make sure you've checked out part 1 and part 2 to make sure that you have context. But without further ado, let's get started. If you're on this part, then you should know all the story and characters by now, so let's get started. The DM, our dwarf fighter, our gnome paladin, the changeling monk with magic gauntlets and a belt of giant strength, and the Aasimar warlock. The only important point here is that the aforementioned paladin was AFK this session, which you wouldn't think was much of a problem, normally. Session 4. So it's important to point out that between sessions, the rest of the party and I all pointed out all the points I was unhappy with, like being railroaded into this mansion and all of my in-game dialogue for the session being handled by the DM. As well as how 3 sessions in, we all had +2 magic items worth thousands of gold and literally nothing to strive for. Or how the rest of the party was forced to take me there and then spend between 10 to 16 hours, depending on when their character slept, taking a long rest during this time. And the DM apologizes and says that he was new to running long campaigns and would fix these problems. So it kind of looked like he was starting to look up for us now, right? Right? Wrong. So my character decided that they wanted to kidnap the child, and, shall we say, remove them, so that my changeling identity had no chance of being revealed. However, the DM decided that the paladin, who was conveniently staying in the same room as me, would now be against me harming the child, and as such, I'm not allowed to do it. So, more than fixing his problems, he's now controlling a second player character. So very begrudgingly, I gave up and everyone woke up after their various amounts of rest with the turtle, who had now been asleep for 16 hours, rightfully being annoyed. Then the DM's level 13 Lich, blending into a level 4 party, decided it was time for us to leave, and that the party wanted to follow him. Luckily, however, I convinced our DM to let me visit the general store first, but mistakenly mention out of character that I'm thinking of stealing thieves' tools from the store, and boy, was that a mistake. I shapeshift in a back alley behind the store to look like a dwarf and enter the store, only to be greeted coldly and immediately suspected of being incredibly suspicious as the merchant eyes their wares like a hawk. So morale fully destroyed at this point, I give in and just buy the tools, not even bothering to argue. Then, after this, the DM teleported us to the Lich's house, which he suddenly remembered where it was. Wonder what we were needed for. He then led the warlock inside, and later out of character, I found out he was bragging to the warlock about his 8 phylacteries and how it made him unkillable. Then we teleported back and traveled to our next city, but not before running into a red dragon on the way there, with only 3 party members in-game at the time. But never fear, for when the party was soon to be TPK'd, the glorious Lich/DM saved us, all without ever revealing his true powers. So we beat this encounter and were suddenly pushed up to level 5, and reach the second town where apparently it's been set up for a great experience for me as an apology for railroading last session. The party got to the inn and heard of a second magical cave appearing near this town, but right now we were too tired. We all knew some way or another we were going to be forced there anyway, but at least there was apparently an interesting encounter planned specifically to apologize for last week's railroading, right? So a half-orc stumbled into the bar, and I saw he had a belt of giant strength with him, offering it to me for some reason if I could beat him in 1v1 combat. However, in our 1v1, we can't use any magic items. All of them have to be removed, except for his belt. So I begrudgingly accepted, and asked him to take me to the map for our fight, which, surprise surprise, didn't exist. Again. A 2-second Google from our warlock of D&D Arena brought a usable map for this supposedly pre-planned encounter. This is also a good time for me to mention that over the course of nearly 3 months, this was our 4th weekly session, as most of our sessions were always cancelled by the GM, being unprepared or busy. So the unprepared nature did not come as a shock to any of us at this point. The fight started, only for me to find out that I have to 1v1 a half-orc barbarian. And I shouldn't have to tell most people what happens when they rage. They get resistance to bludgeoning, slashing, and piercing damages from non-magical weapons. And what was the rule in this fight? You had to remove all weapons and magical items. So now I'm forced to fight a half-orc barbarian 1v1 with none of my equipment. And needless to say, I got hammered into the ground hard. But, ladies and gentlemen, here's the good part. Apparently we couldn't progress any farther until this half-orc was beaten, and trying to beat a 120 HP raging half-orc barbarian with a level 5 monk is impossible to say the least. So I gave up, and I left the session early and brought every other PC in to have a talk about what we were going to do. We started at level 3 with magical items tailored to us off a random drop table. Found even stronger ones a few hours in, and every time we did something new or creative, the DCs were high, or the clear conditions were impossibly hard. And if they weren't, the DM ignored anything we said and moved our characters the way he wanted them to act, and at that point, none of us had even really played at all in almost 2 sessions. The epilogue. So tensions being at max, our choice was clear. We mentioned all our problems and refused to play anymore. We started our own game, and that has, so far, been the best change ever. One of our at-the-time PCs started DMing, and surprisingly, I offered to DM every second week to take the strain off him, doing a weekly session, and our group has loved it. So after an incredibly long story, if someone is railroading you hard, get out fast, because seeing the story pan out the way they want is more important than making a player-driven narrative. And if you think you might be a terrible DM because you've never done it before, you could always be worse. That is all for my incredibly long story of my first time in D&D. But in any case, guys, that's the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed, and if you have a story that you'd like me to narrate, let me know. And as always, thanks for watching, and have a good one.